The year was 1867, and the mountains did not forgive. Snow blanketed the world in silence, swallowing every hoofbeat, every breath, every trace of warmth. Wind cut like a blade through the pine trees, howling through the high passes of Montana Territory where few dared to settle and fewer still survived. Eli Brandt was one of those few, though if you asked him, survival had very little to do with living. He drove the axe into the stump with a grunt. The wood split clean, halves tumbling to the frozen ground. He straightened slowly, his joints aching from the cold, from age, from the stubbornness that kept him breathing long after most men would have laid down and quit. He wasn't old, not exactly, but war and loss had carved deep furrows into him that no mirror could hide. The cabin behind him stood firm against the wind, a squat thing of rough-hewn logs and moss-packed seams. Smoke curled from its chimney, and the mule tied to the post stomped nervously, ears twitching. Eli wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his glove. A storm was building again. He could smell it, that sharp, metallic promise of snow. Then he heard it. Not a coyote, not an elk, not wind. A groan, low, human, and ragged. His hand went to the rifle leaning against the porch post. He didn't call out, didn't ask questions, just followed the sound, quiet, deliberate, like the soldier he used to be. The trees thickened near the eastern edge of his land, and there, caught between two snowbanks, was a wagon half buried and half broken. The front axle had snapped clean. One wheel leaned drunkenly in the snow. A brown horse, dead or dying, lay on its side in the traces, steam no longer rising from its hide. The canvas top of the wagon sagged under the weight of snow, and a dark stain painted the wood near the rear. Eli's jaw clenched. He didn't move at first, didn't want to get involved. Folks meant trouble, especially folks showing up uninvited. But then the canvas stirred. He raised the rifle. A pale hand emerged, then a woman's face, thin, sunken-cheeked, eyes too large in her hollow face. "Please," she said, "please, my children." Eli stared at her. Cold wind whipped past them both, lifting strands of her dark hair. He saw the torn sleeve, the frostbitten fingers, the trembling that ran through her like a wire. "I ain't got room," he said, voice flat. "Ain't got food for more." Her eyes didn't blink. "Then just take the children. They won't make it through another night." He lowered the rifle an inch. That was when he heard it, a cough. Small, weak, from inside the wagon. Damn it. He stepped forward and yanked the canvas back. 3 children. The oldest was a boy, maybe 10, trying to sit up but swaying like a sapling in a windstorm. The middle one, a girl with golden braids, lay curled in blankets that did little against the cold, and the smallest, no more than 4, lay silent, lips blue, eyes fluttering. Eli didn't hesitate. He dropped the rifle, threw open the back of the wagon, and gathered the littlest one in his arms. She was featherlight, too still. "Follow," he growled. The woman staggered after him, half carrying the other 2. Inside the cabin, heat slammed into them. Eli threw more wood on the fire and dragged the ragged cot near the hearth. He laid the girl down and stripped off her wet clothes, tossing a buffalo hide over her. The woman moved to his side, working silently, efficiently, unwrapping the others, checking for frostbite. "They're burning up," she whispered, "but their skin is ice." "Fever," Eli muttered. He grabbed a kettle, filled it with snow, and set it near the fire. Only after the children were settled did he really look at her. She leaned back on her heels, eyes fixed on the smallest one. "What's your name?" he asked. "Clara Jessup," she said, barely above a whisper. "This is Jonah, Mary, and that's Ruth." "You lost?" She shook her head. "Heading to Bozeman. My husband died 2 weeks back, shot by bandits outside Fort Smith. We had to keep going. I didn't know this pass would be so wild." Eli's mouth twisted. Wild was one word for it. Suicidal was another. "You can't stay," he said. "Too dangerous. No extra food. Then send us away when the storm breaks. Just give them a night to live." Eli didn't answer. He knew what the right thing was. He also knew what it cost. They stayed. By morning, the storm hit like cannon fire. Snow came sideways, piling against the door and windows. Eli cut strips from an old blanket and nailed them over the cracks to stop the draft. The mule kicked in protest from the shed. He let it be. He had bigger problems. The girl, Ruth, still hadn't woken. Mary stirred first, blinking up at the firelight, then burrowing closer to her mother. Jonah sat up with a start, eyes wide, but calmed when he saw his family alive. Eli handed him a tin cup of warm broth. "You a soldier?" the boy asked. His voice was hoarse. "Was. Union." Eli nodded once. "My pa was too. Tennessee Volunteers." Clara looked up. He wouldn't stop believing this land could be kind. Eli met her eyes. "It isn't." Later that day, Jonah knocked over a tin cup of oil near the hearth. It spilled across the floor, soaking into the wood. Eli flared. "Damn it, boy. That could have caught the whole place on fire." Jonah's face crumpled. He backed away, blinking fast. Clara rose. "He's 10. He's tired. And he's scared. He's careless. He's a child." Silence fell. The fire popped. Eli's hands curled into fists. "That compass," he said suddenly, pointing to a smashed brass piece near the cot. "He broke it. It's all I had of." He trailed off. His throat worked around something unsaid. "I'm sorry," Jonah said, voice barely a whisper. "I was just looking at it." Clara stood taller. "Then maybe next time, don't leave precious things where children can reach." He should have thrown them out. He didn't. That night, the wolves came. It started with the mule screaming. Eli was out of the chair in seconds, rifle in hand. He threw open the door and wind slammed into him. The mule shed door flapped open wildly. Yellow eyes glinted at the edge of the tree-lean. 3, no, 4 shapes low to the ground, fast, hungry. Inside, he barked, "Get the kids under the bed." He stepped into the snow, boots crunching, heart pounding. He'd faced gunfire and bayonets. He wasn't about to let wild dogs tear apart his home. The first wolf lunged. Eli fired. A yelp. The body fell, twitched, stilled. Then came 2 more. He turned, fired again. 1 bullet grazed, the other missed. A wolf snapped at his leg. He kicked it back. Behind him, Clara screamed. One had slipped past, dashed for the open door. Eli turned, too slow. Then a crack. His old shovel swung hard, Clara striking the wolf across the skull. It yelped and bolted. He slammed the door shut, breathing hard. Inside, the children huddled beneath the cot. Clara's hands shook, but she was standing tall, blood on her sleeve from where the wolf had grazed her. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded. He looked at her again. Really looked. She was tired, thin, but there was steel in her spine, fire in her eyes. Not soft, not weak. Survivor. "I'll board the door," he said. "You sit. I can help." He didn't argue. They worked in silence, side by side. In the days that followed, the cold deepened, but so did the uneasy truce. Clara mended clothes. The children carried water and swept the cabin. Ruth began to stir, coughing but alive. Mary made up songs about the snow. Jonah fixed the door latch. Eli found himself carving again, whittling wood into shapes by firelight. The youngest stared at his hands with wide eyes. "What's that?" she asked one night. He didn't look up. "Horse. Is it for me?" He paused, then handed it over. "Don't break it." "I won't," she whispered, clutching it tight. That night, after the children slept, Clara sat near the fire, her hands folded. "You don't talk much," she said. "I say what needs saying." That's what men always say when they've forgotten how to speak kindly. He looked at her. "You planning to stay?" he asked. She hesitated. "I was headed to Bozeman. Don't know anymore. Still can't stay long. Spring thaws months away. Supplies will run out. We'll work for our keep." He shook his head. "It ain't that." "Then what is it?" He stared into the fire. "They don't last. Families. Homes. Things fall apart." Clara didn't respond. Just watched the flames. Then, quietly, "Maybe you've only seen the kind that weren't worth keeping." Eli didn't answer. Outside, the wind howled again, but this time it wasn't so loud. He stood, stoked the fire, and pulled another hide from the chest. He draped it over the sleeping children. Ruth sighed in her sleep and turned toward him. Clara saw. "Thank you," she whispered. Eli didn't respond, but he sat a little closer to the fire. and didn't leave when she began to hum. Tomorrow might bring trouble. Hunger. Bandits. Worse. But tonight, the cabin felt less empty. He didn't know what that meant. Not yet, but something had shifted. And for the first time in years, Eli Brandt wasn't entirely sure he wanted to be alone. The thaw came slow that spring, like a man crawling back from death. The snow didn't melt so much as retreat, sullen and stubborn, exposing dead grass and half-frozen soil in ragged patches. The woods moaned with it, ice cracking in the pines, riverbeds starting to stir beneath their icy sheaths. For the first time in months, birds sang at dawn, and the sun cut through the haze like a blade through fog. Eli Brandt chopped wood at the clearing's edge, sleeves rolled, shirt damp with sweat. He moved differently now, quieter, less like a ghost. Behind him, laughter floated from a cabin. Clara's voice, then the sound of Mary squealing as Jonah teased her with a pine cone, and Ruth clapping her small hands. There'd been a time, not long ago, when those sounds grated on him like nails and bark. Now, they slipped into the air like music. He wiped his brow and watched them for a beat. Clara stood near the washing line, hanging tattered clothes that flapped in the breeze like surrender flags. Her hair was pinned up, but the wind had teased loose strands. She caught him looking and offered a small smile. He turned away, heart tight. Inside the cabin, things had changed too. The walls felt closer, but not in the way they used to. The quiet had shifted, no longer oppressive, just filled. He still didn't say much, but he listened, and they noticed. One morning, Clara stood beside him at the stove, helping him prepare coffee while the children fed the hens. She handed him a cup and leaned against the rough counter. "You're not what I expected," she said softly. He didn't meet her gaze. Wasn't trying to be anything. "You don't scare easy." War did that. I meant life. That shut him up for a while. That night, after the children were tucked in beneath the hides, Clara sat by the fire, mending a boot sole. The lamplight caught the slope of her cheek, the curve of her jaw. Eli sat in his chair, whittling again, this time not a horse, but something smaller. A bird. The wings weren't quite even. "You ever have children?" she asked gently. His blade paused. "No," he said. "She died before it ever came to that." Clara didn't pry. She nodded and kept sewing. "Your husband," Eli said after a moment. "What was he like?" "Soft-spoken," she said. "Believed in people more than I ever could. He thought kindness could bend fate." "And you?" "I think kindness gets you killed." She smiled, sad and sharp. "But I still teach my children to use it." They sat in silence a while, the fire popping. "I lost someone too," Eli said finally. "My brother. Gettysburg. We were in the same regiment. He bled out on the field while I held him. Told me not to hate. Told me to go home and find something worth holding on to. He set the bird on the mantle. I never did." Clara's fingers stilled. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be. I ignored his last wish for 15 years. That's on me." Later that week, trouble rode in on 2 horses. It was just past noon when the riders appeared dust-covered and grinning, hats pulled low. Eli spotted them before they reached the cabin. He watched from the trees, rifle in hand, as they approached slow, easy, like men who had all the time in the world. The first was lean and mean-eyed, with a crooked scar down his neck. The second, younger, with a twitchy hand and eyes that moved too fast. "Afternoon," Scar called out when they reached the front gate. "Any chance of trading for food or shelter?" Eli stepped from the trees. "No trade," he said flatly. "Keep moving." "Now that ain't neighborly," Scar said, smiling. "Didn't know folks up here could afford to be choosy." "You knew damn well someone was up here. Tracks don't lie. What do you want?" Scar chuckled. "You got a woman. Kids. Nice little setup. Just thought maybe we could share the warmth." Behind him, the younger one slid his hand closer to his belt. Eli didn't move. "You're not staying. Turn around." Scar's smile faded. "We'll remember your hospitality." "Do that." They turned, rode off slow, but Eli knew better. Men like that circled back. He watched the tree lean for hours after. Every rustle in the underbrush, every shift of light. That night, he sat Clara down. "They'll come back." She didn't argue. "Will they kill us?" Mary asked quietly, seated on her mother's lap. "No," Eli said, "not while I'm here." Jonah stared at him. "Can I help? You know how to shoot?" The boy swallowed, then nodded. Eli hesitated, then pulled his second rifle from a rack. He handed it over. Clara's face tightened, but she didn't stop him. "Teach me," Jonah said. "I will." The next day was a blur of preparation. Eli showed Jonah how to load and fire, how to track movement in the brush. Clara and Mary dug shallow trenches near the barn. Ruth helped mix soot and grease to blacken the windows. Eli set traps in the trees, tripwires that rang bells. He buried blades at ankle height in narrow passes. He rigged a rope across the porch that would bring the beam down if someone stepped wrong. "Are we really doing this?" Clara asked as they hammered boards across the windows. He looked at her. "We're surviving." On the third day they came. It was near midnight. The moon high. Snow had begun to fall again. Muffling sound. A bell rang once. Then twice. Eli rose from the chair and cocked the rifle. Clara grabbed Ruth and shoved her under the cot. Mary followed. Jonah took position by the fireplace, breath fast, eyes wide. Then came the knock. Slow. Lazy. "Well now," Scar called from outside. "Thought we'd give you one more chance to reconsider, neighbor. Let us in. Just want to talk." Eli said nothing. "You sure?" Scar asked. "Because next time we knock, it'll be with lead." Then came the crash. A bottle, flaming, shattered against the wall. Fire licked the outer logs. Eli rushed to stomp it out using a hide. Smoke seeped in thick and choking. Gunshots. 2. Then 3. Wood splintered. A window shattered. Clara screamed. "Stay down." Eli barked, returning fire through the hole in the wall. A shape darted past the porch, then fell. Jonah's rifle smoked. "I got one," the boy gasped. Then the front door burst inward. The younger man charged, pistol raised. Eli fired. Missed. The man tackled him. They crashed to the floor, rolling. Eli's shoulder struck the hearth hard. Fire flared dangerously close. He grabbed for the blade on his belt. Missed. The intruder raised the pistol. Clara screamed, then stabbed him through the side. The man gasped, dropped the gun. Blood poured from his ribs. Eli kicked him off, grabbed the pistol, and fired once. The man collapsed, twitching. Outside, Scar shouted. Then silence. Eli moved to the porch. A shadow fled into the trees. He didn't chase. He wouldn't need to. Morning came red. The cabin was quiet, ruined. Smoke blackened. Blood on the floor on Clara's hands. Jonah sat with his back to the wall, arms around his sisters. Clara looked at Eli, eyes raw. "Are we safe now?" He nodded. "For now." She stood and helped him to the chair. His ribs ached. His shoulder throbbed. Clara cleaned the wound. Didn't ask if it hurt. "You should have let us leave," she said softly. He looked at her. "You're not leaving?" She stared. "I built this place to keep the world out," he said. "But your kids, you brought something back in." Clara's voice trembled. "We didn't mean to." "I know." She sat beside him. The children slept on the floor, bundled in what warmth remained. He reached for the broken compass, held it a moment, then tossed it into the fire. It hissed, curled. "Some things," he said, "ain't worth holding on to." Clara didn't speak, but she laid her hand over his. And for the first time in 15 years, Eli didn't pull away. Dawn broke over the ridge in bands of rose and gold, the kind of morning that tricked a man into believing winter might not come back. The snow had melted from the south-facing slope, leaving behind dark soil and muddy patches where the sun lingered longest. Steam rose from the earth as it warmed, casting the clearing in a mist that softened the jagged edges of the world. Eli stood near the tree-lean, shovel in hand, boots sunk deep in the loam. He drove the blade into the ground, grunted, and turned the soil. Behind him, the cabin sat quiet and repaired, smoke curling from the chimney again, not in desperation, but in peace. It had been 4 weeks since the attack. For weeks since Clara had driven a knife into a stranger's ribs, and Jonah had pulled a trigger without flinching. For weeks of silence and stitching and healing. The days had passed without ceremony, just the steady rhythm of work. But Eli felt the change deep as the marrow in his bones. He wasn't alone anymore. He wiped sweat from his brow with his forearm and looked toward the cabin. Clara was there on the porch, shelling peas into a wooden bowl, sleeves rolled, hair tied back. Mary sat at her feet, humming. Ruth held a wooden spoon like a sword and fought imaginary foes along the step. Jonah hauled firewood from a stack near the shed, stronger now, more sure-footed. Eli watched them for a long time before returning to the garden. This wasn't what he'd planned. He'd built the cabin high in the hills to escape. All this to bury his past where no one could dig it up. He'd sealed himself inside these woods with the kind of grief that didn't speak, didn't cry, just sat heavy in the chest like a stone. But Clara had knocked, and the children had followed, and now the walls he'd so carefully built were beginning to feel more like doors. That night, as they gathered around the table, Clara passed stew from the pot in the center. Ruth insisted on saying grace, and though her words rambled into nonsense about goats and fairies and not burning the biscuits, Eli bowed his head. The fire cracked in the hearth. The light touched each face in turn. Jonah grinned as Mary dropped a potato in her lap. Clara laughed softly and passed her a napkin. Eli felt something catch in his throat. Not pain, not fear, just a tightness he hadn't felt in years. Later, after the children were tucked beneath quilts, he and Clara sat on the porch. The moon hung low over the trees, casting the clearing in silver. "They're changing," she said quietly, "becoming whole again." Eli nodded. "So am I." She looked at him. "Do you ever think about leaving this place?" "I used to think I'd die here. And now?" He glanced at her, then back at the moon. "Now, I think I might live here." She smiled, faint but real. "I don't know what comes next," she said, "but I know it can't be alone." Eli looked at her hand, resting beside his. He reached for it slowly, fingers brushing hers. She didn't pull away. "I buried my brother after Gettysburg," he said. "Then I buried my wife. Then I buried myself. You and the kids, you dug me up." Clara's fingers tightened around his. "Then let's build something," she said. He didn't answer, but he didn't let go either. Spring deepened. Trees bloomed. The stream thawed and gurgled again through the rocks. The world, once gray and brittle, had color now, green, gold, even red, when Mary stole berries from the thickets and smeared them across her face like war paint. The garden sprouted. Jonah set traps for rabbits. Clara hemmed pants that didn't quite fit anymore. And Eli, without meaning to, began to whistle while he worked. One morning, as he repaired the barn's roof, Clara appeared at the ladder's base. "There's a man riding up the trail." Eli climbed down fast. Rifle in hand, he walked to the ridge. A single rider approached, tall, with a dust-stained hat and a long rifle slung behind his saddle. Eli stepped into view and raised a hand. The rider slowed. "Looking for a woman named Jessup," he called. "Said she might be up this way." Clara stepped from behind the porch post. The man smiled. "Clara Jessup, you're a hard woman to find." Eli watched her face. Her mouth opened, then closed again. "Who are you?" she asked. "Name's Ben Travers. I rode with your husband once. He sent word. Said if anything ever happened, someone should check in on you." Clara stepped forward slowly, eyes wary. Ben dismounted and pulled a leather pouch from his saddlebag. "Found this in a box he left behind. Said it was for you." Clara opened the pouch and pulled out a folded letter, yellowed and creased. She read in silence. Tears welled but did not fall. Eli stood beside her but said nothing. When she finished, she looked up. "Thank you." Ben tipped his hat. "I'll be heading west, ma'am. Just wanted to make sure you were safe." "You've done that." He nodded to Eli. "You keep him safe, too." "I will." Ben mounted, wheeled his horse, and disappeared into the trees. Clara folded the letter and held it close. "He told me once," she whispered, "that he didn't care if we lived in a palace or a shack, as long as we were safe, as long as the children were loved." Eli looked down at the porch, the cabin, the clearing beyond, then at her. "They are." That evening, Clara didn't hum while she cooked. She moved slower, quieter. After supper, she sat alone by the hearth, staring into the flames. Eli approached, pulled up a chair. "You thinking of leaving?" "I don't know. That letter reminded me of everything we'd planned. All the things we didn't get to do. You can still go. I know. You could take the kids, find a town, a school, a new life. She looked at him. And if I asked you to come with us? He didn't answer right away. I don't know how to live anywhere, but here, he admitted, and I don't know how to leave you behind. The fire popped. The children laughed in the loft. He reached for her hand again. You don't have to decide tonight. But he could see the pull in her eyes, the weight of promise of paths untaken. The next day, a storm rolled in sudden and violent. Wind roared down from the peaks. The sky turned black before noon. Ruth screamed when lightning struck a tree near the barn. Jonah ran to secure the shed door. Eli fought the wind to pull down the clothesline while Clara gathered the animals. Rain poured in sheets, soaking the clearing, drowning the creek, turning the ground to sludge. The cabin shook under the wind's force. Then a sound. Crack. Splinter. A scream. The barn roof gave way. Eli sprinted through the rain. Inside, the mule kicked wildly, trapped beneath a beam. Eli ducked flying hooves, grabbed an axe, and chopped through the beam. The roof groaned. He grabbed the reins and pulled the mule free, just as the back wall collapsed in a thunder of wood and mud. Soaked to the bone, he staggered back to the cabin. Clara waited at the door. Ruth ran to him, arms outstretched. He dropped to his knees and hugged her tight. Later, when the storm passed, they stood outside and surveyed the damage. Roof's gone. Hay's soaked. We'll need to rebuild, Clara said. I can do it, Eli replied. We can do it. They started the next morning. Together, they raised new beams, hammered new nails, braced each corner with care. The children fetched wood and held tools. Ruth painted the inside of the stall with her fingers and declared it art. By week's end, the barn stood stronger than before. That night, they celebrated with stew and warm bread. Clara sang for the first time in weeks. Jonah played the old harmonica he'd found. Mary and Ruth danced until they collapsed in a giggling heap. Eli watched it all and felt something unshakable settle in his chest. This was no longer just survival. This was life. Summer came in soft golden waves. The garden flourished. Birds nested in the eaves. The air turned thick with bees and wildflowers. Every evening brought a breeze heavy with pine and the distant scent of river water. Eli built a second room onto the cabin. Clara didn't ask why. She just helped. He built it strong. Thick logs, wide beams, a window facing east so the sun would pour in each morning. When it was done, he carved a name into the lintel, Jessup. Clara traced the letters with her fingers. This place saved us, she said. No, Eli answered. You saved me. At summer's end, the children stood on the porch as the first yellow leaves fell. Jonah looked up. Ma. Yes. Is this home now? Clara looked at Eli. He nodded. Yes, she said. It is. Eli walked the ridge that evening, rifle slung across his back. The air was cool and clean. He stopped beneath the same pine where he'd first spotted Clara's broken wagon. The earth was still scarred there. He could see the faint marks of wagon wheels, the bent saplings, the shadow of what had almost died. He knelt, ran his hand through the dirt. I hear you, Sam, he murmured, eyes on the sky. I found something worth holding on to. Behind him, Clara called his name. He turned and saw her standing at the edge of the clearing, hair braided, dress fluttering. He walked back, slow, steady. She met him halfway. In the distance, the children's laughter rang out. So, what do we take from this tale? Maybe it's this: some men build walls so high they forget they were meant to keep out the cold, not the world. And maybe sometimes the right knock at the door doesn't just change the day, it changes a life. Eli Brandt opened that door, and in doing so, he found a reason to build again, not walls but a home. If this story moved you, don't forget to share it. Somewhere, someone still believes they're alone. Remind them a knock might be coming, and this time they should open the door. The wind rolled low through the trees, dry and warm, stirring dust devils at the edge of the clearing. It was late August, and the hills lay golden under a sun that burned hard but not long, hinting that autumn lurked just beyond the ridge. Inside the cabin, Clara buttoned Mary's dress while Ruth fussed with the ribbons in her hair. Stop fidgeting, Clara murmured, smoothing Ruth's curls. Jonah, get the boots. The boy dragged them in with a grunt, flopping onto the floor. Do we have to go? Preacher Wilkes smells like vinegar. Eli leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching it all unfold like some living painting he didn't want to disturb. You don't go for him. You go for your mother. And for your own soul, just in case. Jonah rolled his eyes, but didn't argue. It had been nearly 6 months since the barn had been rebuilt. 6 months of steady days, steady hands, and something that resembled joy. The cabin had become a home, but homes invited notice, and word had finally reached the valley towns that the ghost of the northern woods wasn't a ghost anymore. He was flesh. He had people. He had something to lose. Eli hadn't spoken of it to Clara, not the telegram left at the general store in Ironwood, not the pair of riders he spotted scouting the West Trail. But the weight had settled in his bones like a storm coming. Today it pressed harder. They'd planned to ride down to Rivet Hill for supplies and Sunday service. Clara had even sewn new collars for the girls. But as the wagon creaked onto the trail, Eli's eyes kept scanning the horizon, his hand never far from the rifle beneath the seat. Just before noon, they rolled into town. Rivet Hill was barely a town at all. 3 stores, 1 crooked saloon, a church built from scrap pine, and a street more dust than road. But it was crowded this morning. Horses lined the hitch rails. Strangers leaned on porches with hands on gun belts. And near the smithy, a familiar shape stood beside a jet-black mare, broad shoulders, a slouch hat, and a scar running down his cheek like a riverbed. Eli felt his blood freeze. Clara looked up from her reins. What is it? He climbed down without answering. Then he took the rifle and walked, slow but sure, toward the man by the horse. The man turned. Well, hell, didn't think you had the guts to show your face below tree line, Brant. Eli stopped 10 paces away. Didn't think you were dumb enough to follow me, Jeb. Jeb Carroway grinned wide, but it didn't reach his eyes. Didn't follow you. Heard tell of some woodsman set in up shop with a war widow and 3 brats. Figured it had to be you. Ain't that sweet? Eli's knuckles whitened on the stock. Turn around. Ride out. Nah, Jeb said, tilting his head. See, you got something belongs to me. Not the woman, don't flatter yourself. But that land you're squatting on, that's claimable. And I've got a deed waitin' in Dead Horse Junction. All legal. You want land? Buy land. I want your land. Eli took 1 step forward. You'll get it when you pry it from my cold hands. That was the idea. Jeb's hand twitched toward his holster, but he didn't draw. Not here. Not with half the town watching. Instead, he backed away, still smiling. You best get your affairs in order, Brant. Storm's comin'. And I ain't the only one riding in. Then he mounted, tipped his hat to Clara, and trotted out of town. Clara walked up beside Eli, pale. Who was that? Old Trouble, Eli said. Didn't stay buried. They left town before the sermon started. That night, Eli saddled the mule and rode the perimeter of the homestead. He checked every trail, every tree line, every shadow. The woods no longer gave comfort. They whispered now, warnings in the wind. By the time he returned, the moon had risen and Clara waited on the porch. You should have told me, she said. I thought maybe it would pass. It won't. He nodded. I need to build a barricade. Set traps. Reinforce the door. We could run. Jeb Carroway doesn't let people run. He hunts. And he's got a crew now. Clara looked toward the sleeping cabin. What do we do? We fight. The next day, Eli handed Jonah a blade and showed him how to notch traps. He sent Ruth and Mary gathering stones for sling bullets. Clara loaded rounds into every chamber, cleaned every barrel. By dusk, the cabin looked like a fortress. Ropes across the clearing, trenches dug, brush piled high around the barn for cover. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Night fell like a hammer. Eli sat by the front window, rifle on his lap, eyes on the darkened trail. At midnight, they came. 6 riders, slow and deliberate. Torches high, faces hidden under wide brims. Clara took the girls to the loft. Jonah crouched behind the front door with his father's old pistol. Eli opened the window shutter, just enough to see. Jeb Caraway rode front and center. "Evenin', Brant. You ready to come to your senses?" "You come any closer," Eli called, "and I'll drop you where you stand." Big talk from a man with a cabin full of kids. Think about Eli. Think about what they'll see, what they'll remember. Eli's heart pounded. They'll remember you dying in the mud. A shot cracked. What exploded beside Eli's head. He dove back, shouting, "Now!" Jonah fired through the slats. Clara shot from aloft. Bullets tore the night open, fire flashing from the trees. The riders scattered. One fell. Another crashed into a ditch. Eli leapt from the porch and rolled behind the wagon. He picked off a man reloading near the stump, then ducked as a slug splintered the spokes beside him. Clara shouted from above, "Left flank." Eli turned and fired twice. Screams, curses. The smell of black powder filled the air. But Jeb wasn't among the fallen. From the corner of his eye, Eli saw movement near the barn, Jeb creeping low, torch in hand. "No!" Eli sprinted, dodging fire, vaulted the fence, and tackled him just as the torch flew. It struck the barn wall and burst. Flames licked up the timbers. Jeb punched Eli hard and the gut rolled and grabbed his knife. Eli blocked the first slash, but the second caught his arm. Pain flared white. He struck back, elbow to jaw, then drove his fist into Jeb's throat. Jeb choked, staggered. Eli kicked him into the mud. Then the knife flashed again, low, fast, wild. Too close. A shot rang out. Jeb froze. Blood bloomed from his chest. Clara stood behind him, rifle smoking. Jeb dropped. Eli knelt, breathing hard. She rushed to him. "You're bleeding." "I'll live." Behind them, the barn burned bright, crackling like bones in the fire. The riders had scattered. One lay dead. The others vanished into the trees. By dawn, the flames had died. So had Jeb. The barn stood charred and empty, blackened ribs reaching skyward like a broken ship. Eli sat on the porch steps, bandaged, bruised. The children huddled inside. Clara brought him water. He took it with shaking hands. "They'll come back," she said. "No," he said. "Not now. Not after this." She sank beside him. "Then what now?" He stared at the rising sun. "We rebuild. Again." Her hand found his. "And this time," she whispered, "we do it together. From a foundation up." He looked at her, eyes raw. "I almost lost all of you. But you didn't." He nodded. "You were right," she added. "We don't have to be alone anymore." The wind stirred the ashes. Somewhere beyond the trees, the world moved on. But here, in this battered clearing, a home still stood. Wounded, weathered, but unbroken. And in that, there was something stronger than stone or steel. There was love. There was family. And for the first time in years, Eli Brant believed in both.